Hello and welcome to the Neurodiversity lecture series delivered by LVS Hassocks and LVS Oxford. My name is Chris Childs and I'm Deputy Head at LVS Oxford. Today I'm going to be talking to you about nurturing homeschool partnership and parental engagement and why it is absolutely critical to enable our children to fully thrive when they're learning. So, why is parental engagement so important? The Education Endowment Fund produced a report which identified 4 areas that schools would need to consider when putting together a strategy for improving parental engagement, and I will come on to looking at those 4 areas later in the presentation. But I wanted to talk about what they identify as being so important. They say, parents play a crucial role in supporting their children's learning, and levels of parental engagement are consistently associated with better academic outcomes. So before we move on to looking at those in particular, let's talk about what do successful learners do. Well, if there is a very successful homeschool partnership and things are working well, we know that students do better and are able to learn better both inside and outside of the classroom. Their behaviours include engaging in independent activities, exhibiting positive behaviour and learning habits, and prioritising individual learning. And these kinds of skills will help them with their lifelong learning and their capacity to move into the workplace. And it's an essential part of preparation for adulthood. But part of all of this is where there are disagreements, there's conflict, and sometimes schools can go through a period where parental engagement is not as good as it could be, and there is no particularly successful ways of working in partnership with parents. So what do we know and understand about this? Well, the Department of Education has said disagreements in relationships are normal and not necessarily problematic when resolved constructively. However, when parents are entrenched in conflict that is frequent, intense and poorly resolved, it is likely to have a negative impact on the parents and their children. So schools do need to take this particular aspect of their work very seriously. Nurturing a homeschool partnership is an outward-facing strategy that really can make a difference to the learning of the children. So there are 3 clear areas that a school would need to consider when taking on the responsibility of developing and nurturing the partnership. And I've used the picture there of skydivers because I do think it does require a whole community approach. And yes, it can be scary and it can be difficult and challenging, but as you can see, you can all arrive safely on the ground if you're working together. So, ideally, communication needs to be clear, professional, timely and respectful. This is where all schools need to really think about how they gather parental views and aspirations, make it accessible, and not only that, learn about the parents and the communities that the children come from. They are, and quite possibly, likely to be very different from ourselves, so it's worth spending time on learning a bit more about the parents. Also, it needs to be a two-way process. They learn about us, we learn about them, and the child in the centre of all of this benefits. And make sure that we provide support straight away at the right time, so parents feel that the communication process is effective and will work for the benefit of their child. And you can set out your plans for this in a communication policy, which should be available on the school website. So, I think the easiest thing for us to do in a busy school is to resort to emails. However, we know from various studies that face-to-face contact or telephone calls tend to be far more effective. In-person communication should always take precedence over email or text when a personnel or sensitive issue is involved. Technology-based communication methods often fail to convey warmth or tone, while face-to-face conversations can help ease the process of discussing volatile topics. We all know that there is a lot of emotion in the room when parents are upset about something that is happening with their child. So actually meeting with them face-to-face gives them the impression, or very strongly creates a better forum in which to kind of deal with the problems or find a solution together. Also be consistent. we need to return to the idea that the child is at the centre of everything that we do, and that also means sometimes talking about things and making decisions which are difficult for the adults to understand, accept, move on from. And actually, if we keep going back to what the child needs and how those needs can be met, often that takes the temperature out of the emotion in terms of any conflict that might be happening between parents and schools. Also, make sure that parents feel like they're getting the right information. And this can be delivered in many different ways. We know that a lot of parents find it much easier to get short text mail type messages about pieces of information. We use Parental in our school, and it just means that key pieces of information are flagged up and more likely to be read and absorbed by the parents. But behind all of this, you have to empower your staff. It's all very well asking staff members and teachers to speak to parents when there is a concern raised, but if they don't feel confident and comfortable in that situation, it's unlikely that a resolution will be achieved in the way that you would like it to, or it makes it more risky. And I do think parents need to feel they can approach staff and have a really effective and valuable conversation to reach a solution for their child. So collaboration, actively listen, do less talking and more listening. Learn about your child, children in your school from the parents, and understand their perspective. Help them feel that they are part of the decision-making process along with their child. Get them involved in the school as a community. Talk about the school as a community of children, parents and school staff. They could be involved in things like coming in and talking to students during an assembly about the work that they do or an interest that they have. They could come and help with setting up a project in art. So get the parents to feel like they are part of the community and are invested in the school. And also be prepared to work with external agencies. And if that's not possible or appropriate, certainly provide parents with the information they need to contact those external agencies. So for all of this is about helping the children really learn, particularly children with autism. They need to move from each setting where the stresses and strains of transition are minimised. And this is really achieved if parents and schools are in constant contact, the communication is good, and that they can see patterns of expected behaviours and an attitude to learning that moves from the school and into the home. So you have the child at the centre, you have the home, you need to be aware of the communities that these children come from and the sensitivities around that, and also the school. So where do our children learn? Our children learn at home first and foremost. This is where the building blocks of who they are established, and this is where parents become aware that their child may have traits that suggest autism. How they then deal with that is going to have a very big impact on how the child is going to present in school. And it's really important that we understand the process that they've gone through to get their diagnosis for their child and what steps they have taken to learn more about the diagnoses and also the professionals that they've worked with. This will really inform how they then interact with their child at home, because everywhere you're learning, from a child learning how to put their coat on to loading the dishwasher, all of these things are important for that child to learn to be independent. And the Education Endowment Fund report said in 2021 there is an established link between the home learning environment at all ages and children's performance at school. Schools and parents have shared priority to deliver the best outcomes for their children. So it is a shared responsibility, and we need to see that for our children with autism that there is a real determined effort from all involved with that child to help them become more independent and be ready for adulthood. So then they come into our school environment, and educational settings, schools and colleges are all about getting them ready to learn more about themselves, thrive, make progress, and be able to manage it as independent adults. And the 4 areas that are really particularly important for us with children with EHCPs is looking at how we can prepare them for employment, particularly for me in years 7, 8 and 9, really looking at their communication and interaction needs and difficulties and the way in which they can work to learn some skills to help them navigate that aspect of being an adult. Also, independent living, we need to be able to provide them an opportunity to learn the building blocks of what they need to be independent. How they can be part of a community. Now, the community could be where they live, but also finding ways to access other people, whether it be joining a cycling club or a film group or even a virtual group on something. We need, as a school setting, to work with parents to help those children access their communities independently. And also, we need to be working together for the health of these children. And I call it in our school well-being, and that's a holistic approach. So it's physical as well as mental health, giving these children the opportunities to understand that by being physically healthy, that has an enormous impact on their emotional and mental health, along with the strategies that they can be taught by some of our work with them as teachers, but also their work with them their work with our SALT and our OT, our speech and language therapists and our occupational therapists. So get them involved, get the children learning experientially. That's the best way for them to move forward. And if they do that in the home and at school, it becomes far more embedded in their toolkit for coping and managing as adults. So where else do we learn? We mentioned community. This is something I think is really important. I talk a lot about community in our school and our community values, and they're not just about adults telling that to children. This is something we have to model and demonstrate in the way that we work, and we would want our adults, the parents and all staff in the school to model really positive values as well as seeing themselves as learners. So this is a piece of advice produced in a report by Gibson and Blandford. They said, the school with an open door policy makes parents partners to their child's education process, and this strives to become an influential factor in the life of the community. The interpersonal relationships create the ethos and shared beliefs and values. The whole school feeling exists to such an extent that it drives the school as a community towards achieving goals. Yes, it creates a really positive, forward-thinking community of learners. And this is really good for enabling students with autism to make steps forward in their progress and to thrive. So there are other places that we know autistic young people learn, and these places can be positive, but they also can have a detrimental effect. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the amount of time that students with autism tend to want to go on screens. It's not for all children with autism, but we just need to be mindful as soon as they go onto the internet, they're then being exposed to other influences. And we just need to make sure that for these children that we are very clear, all the adults that they come across in partnership together as a community are enabling these children to be safe when they are accessing the internet. A particular report here talks about how when parents really grasp the science of what happens in the brain when children interact with screen devices and understand how these things specifically impact autism, they are much better able to restrict screens appropriately and are less swayed by social pressures. They see how screen time translates into certain symptoms in their child. They prioritise brain health over being tech savvy and appreciate that every minute spent on a screen is a trade-off. So we use screens, we use technology in our teaching and learning because we think that these are excellent tools to access learning, and also it's a part of the way adults in working life work. However, getting the children, or understanding that the children need support with managing that and where they're getting their information from, it is a critical part of what we do, and that can only work if we work in partnership with parents. So going back to the EEF, the Education Endowment Fund's research and strategy, I mentioned that there were 4 elements to this. It provides a very useful guide for schools, and also I think it's quite enlightening for parents. We need to understand how we as schools work with our parents and be honest and open. Where does it work? Where does it not work? How can we make it possible to support students when they go home? As I said, learning doesn't necessarily need to be homework. Our children don't get set homework as such. But how can we support them with learning things like washing their clothes, cooking a basic meal, keeping themselves clean? All of this we can do to support parents at home through our PSHE programme and our life skills work. Giving parents a very clear understanding of what it is that we're doing can then support them with any work that they then pick up at home. Also, we need to make sure that the communication tools that we use encourage a positive dialogue about learning. Give parents the opportunity to talk and say what they have to say about their understanding of learning, and really listen, and help these parents feel that they can have their say for the benefit of their child. And also it allows you to then pick up on any misunderstandings and deal with any issues that are raised. And definitely know your parents enough and know your students enough to work out where more sustained and intensive support might be needed. And with our school, we have access to a SALT and an OT, and they are absolutely invaluable with supporting children and their learning, and then speaking with parents about what they have done and how this might translate into the home environment. And indeed, when they're older, other environments such as the workplace. Okay, so most of our children arrive with us with EHCPs, and we are very keen to make sure that these are putting the child at the centre and very much something that the parents feel invested in terms of supporting their child's learning. So what I've written for you here are 2 examples for Key Stage 3 and 2 examples of Key Stage 4. A lot of what we do is about enabling these children to be independent. So if you look at, for example, the top right-hand box are some ideas about what these children will need to be able to do or demonstrate in many workplaces in terms of work skills and communication interaction skills. We know that this is going to be challenging for these children. However, we can break this down into manageable steps. So if we looked at the box on the left, it says, by the end of Key Stage 3, Joe Bloggs will be able to independently and routinely use at least 2 methods to support forward planning and time management, such as an app or a wall chart. So for example, our children very often feel more comfortable interacting with a piece of tech. If we teach them how to use that piece of tech in a way that will help support them organise daily routines, that could take away such a high level of anxiety that that child might have, opening their eyes in the morning, waking up and thinking, what does my day look like? If they have got a system in place, they can look and plan ahead, a bit like the tutor does in the morning when we go through the visual timetable with our students. If you look on the right-hand box and you see the Key Stage 4 outcomes, there's also the idea of resilience, which is probably the most challenging aspect of working with children with autism, that their anxiety levels make it incredibly difficult sometimes to move forward with their learning. So here's an example about how we could pin that down to a very specific outcome. By the end of Key Stage 4, Joe Bloggs will demonstrate greater resilience when faced with everyday setbacks by using problem-solving strategies such as my circle of control and positive narrative to support a growth mindset. And that's something that we can deliver both as teachers, but also through OT and SALT and work that we can do with our parents at home when the child is suffering from anxiety and it's becoming such a barrier to their accessing the learning. So if you look at that second one, that also then translates into the child moving into the workplace. By the end of Key Stage 4, Joe Bloggs will be able to independently, appropriately and safely engage in short, straightforward, transactional email communication with a known recipient using the correct level of formality and tone. And that is something that we can actively teach and they can then practice in their work experience placements. So I've run through quite a few suggestions of things that schools could do to work on nurturing homeschool partnership and parental engagement. Here are a few of some of those and a few extras. A couple of notable ones, I think coffee mornings and open mornings with a particular theme or focus for parents is really helpful. Get the children to show what they're doing, to take a responsible role in those open mornings, and that really does build a real strong community between parents, children and schools. Also, make sure you're clear about boundaries. You know, there is nothing wrong in saying to a parent, this is outside my area of expertise. One of the things that can sometimes happen is parents who are very concerned about dealing with an issue with their child feel that the school has the answer when the school actually is not the best place to deal with that particular issue. And we need to be open and honest and say, let's talk to somebody else. Let's point you in the direction of the right person who can help us with solving this particular issue. We don't want to overpromise and then underdeliver. Also recognise parental needs. Some of our parents would really benefit from having ICT workshops and a better understanding of how to use the internet safely. And also, I think lastly, let's get parents into schools in ways that can help our students. They can see real learners in the adult world, people who've gone out to work and learnt new skills, and give them opportunities to come and talk to students about what they have learnt and where they are going with their particular work and careers. Last of all, I wanted to mention role models. If you can work with parents and students about working out who they think are the best role models for learning, sometimes that can be incredibly influential, and this is a particular person that I think is demonstrates, I think, our particular school ethos and values, and this is Chris Packham. He's done quite a few programmes on TV about what it's like to be autistic, and he really does show us how important it is to be well, and to that means physically, mentally, emotionally, so that you can achieve your aspirations. He has achieved his aspirations in that he lives and breathes and talks about nature and wildlife and the environment. In fact, he was on Radio 4 this morning. And he's got to a destination that gives him that sense of well-being. He is able to function and be himself in an environment that suits who he is and his strengths as a person. So I think that sort of thing can be something that home and school can work on together in developing a really positive, nurturing communication model so that our young people are surrounded by role models where learning and developing and growing is what we do every day. Thank you for listening to this talk, and best of luck with your experiences with your children.